All right, ladies and gentlemen, to our colleagues, it is now time to start the afternoon session, which is the opening session. But before we commence the session, I have a short announcement about our structure here on the stage. Someone may have asked if this is made of styrofoam. Yes, it is true, but it is a recycled one, for your information. All right. During the opening session, which is the first of our afternoon program, students from 10 different countries will share how they address climate change in their own respective but impactful ways and discuss recommendable measures together. Also, we have a following special session through which we can listen to special lectures from the experts in the field. But before we do so, let us have a delegation Mcop co-president, Mr. Navid Nahullaji, apology for my poor pronunciation, for declaration of the opening. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him with a big hand.
Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to Mcop. My name is Navid Mahluji and I have the pleasure of being your co-president alongside Ms. Chang. Respected delegates, we are in deep trouble. Climate change is driving with an unprecedented speed and we are falling behind. We need to catch up before it's too late, before we perish. For millions of people, this is already a matter of life or death, and more people are falling victim to the climate crisis, especially in the developing world. This meeting is the most important meeting on climate change this year. We need to state the danger and the urgency of our current situation. We need to keep in mind the reasons that brought us here today. Climate change knows no borders. Everyone on our planet is affected by it. We need to work together to enable the world to act collectively on climate crisis. There have been major achievements so far. Paris Agreement is one example that shows it is possible for different parties to come together and reach an agreement. COP24 in Katowice was another example in which we decided on the rule books for climate action. In these meetings, in the next 3 days, all must participate in debates, and we expect full engagements from the respected parties. In the next 2 days, we need to ensure that we meet the 2020 commitments, especially regarding finance. I believe, in spite of different interests that different parties have, we can come together once again for our home, planet Earth. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, the opening session is now ready to start. Next, Secretary General Kim Ji-hoon of Mcop will brief the agenda today. Would you please come up to the stage? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome her with a big hand.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ji-hoon Kim, who is General Secretary of 2019 Mcop. Before we start, I'd like to mention you one thing, that if you are a broad member of middle schools or high schools undergraduate students, you shall stay after dinner, please, for discussion. When people had been suffering from natural disaster or climate change on the blue planet, what will you do at the moment? Recently, the most crucial political question in global scale is what is going to happen after finishing Kyoto Protocol. After holding 2013 Mcop, 6 years are passed. And now, again, this is second Mcop for climate change, what has been changed and what has been still remained. The amount of greenhouse gases are more rapidly increasing than the worst scenario that IPCC suggested before. And economics is based on the most rational decision. The theory of economy reduces countries' intention to reduce greenhouse gases. In order to keep benefits of economy in the developing countries and decrease greenhouse gases, we need to negotiate. The international negotiation is crucial to deal with greenhouse gases. The Kyoto bargaining process, the beginning of climate change negotiations, were auspicious. Soon after a scientific consensus of the problem emerged, an agreement was signed at the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. Which was eventually signed by 194 countries. Members of the OECD countries and 12 post-communist countries agreed to stabilize their emissions at 1990 levels by 2000 and to work on agreement to reduce emissions in the second decade. However, binding commitments proved to be more difficult to agree upon the general principles, and the 1997 Kyoto Protocol fell short of expectations. First, the developing countries refused to adopt binding emissions targets and avoided emissions quotas. Second, the targets adopted were not ambitious. Finally, the Kyoto Protocol contains no enforcement provisions, and actually implementing the negotiating targets proved to be a serious problem for most of the countries that promised emissions reductions. In spite of the weakening of the accord, the most important producer of greenhouse gases failed to ratify. In the leap of the Kyoto, the US Senate had passed the Breed-Hagel proposition resolution opposing any agreement that failed to impose restrictions on developing countries. And they imposed substantial costs on the US economy. The two objections that no feasible treaty could satisfy. President Clinton chose not to submit protocol for ratification because he judges that it could not be ratified by the Senate. In March 2001, the Bush administration announced its rejection of the Kyoto Protocol because the treaty was deemed fatally flawed in fundamental ways. It would harm the American economy and would not remit emissions by developing countries, despite European offers to renegotiate the Kyoto Protocol. The United States remained one of the few countries beyond the reach of European diplomacy. So negotiations continued on a range of issues, including emissions targeting and carbon sinks. Policies that remove CO2 from the atmosphere, such as reforestation, land management, and some forms of agriculture could make a country eligible for credits against its emissions reduction target, known as removal units. So, ratification by a sufficient number of parties brought the Kyoto Protocol into force in 2004, but the final agreement fell far short of the ambitions of the original UN framework. Convention on Climate Change. By this point, the scientific evidence of severity of global climate change was much more impressive than it had been in 1992. And it became widely recognized that the Kyoto Protocol did not go nearly far enough to contain the risks. Then why was international cooperation so ineffective and so difficult to achieve in this case? The United States failed to ratify the agreement, and Russia used the threat of non-ratification as a potent source of bargaining leverage. So the 2019 Mcop closely simulates the work of the UNFCCC for the purpose of giving students the chance to learn and experience firsthand the work being of international government level to live with the problem of climate change. The students will be simulating the UNFCCC conference for the middle school and high school students, as well as college undergraduate students will participate in this mock conference under the theme of Execution is Everything. So we have 4 discussion points. First is, has significant damage already been experienced, which is for SBSTA subsidiary stations? And second question is, why are emissions still increasing? This discussion question for SBI subsidiary session. And third one, can we not share green technology? This question is for TEC subsidiary session. And last one, what is the role of the GCF for developing countries? It's all for subsidiary bodies. So a key task for the COP is to review the national communications and emission inventory submitted by the parties. So based on this information, the COP assesses the effects of the measures taken by the parties and progress made in achieving the ultimate objective of convention. Though there have been 24 COP meetings after the initial 1995 Berlin, thus for the mobilization of a stronger and more ambitious climate action plan and strategy is urgently required to achieve the goals and objectives of the Paris Agreement. Action must come from governments, cities, regions, and business and investors. It is clear that everyone has a role to play in effectively implementing the Kyoto Protocol of 1997, Copenhagen Accord of 2009, and Paris Agreement of 2015 too. So, 2019 Songdo Model Conference COP highlights the critical work that is being done to address the distress effects of climate change. Thus, the occasion of the 2019 Songdo Model COP will give students the chance to see how climate change is being addressed by the global community by participating in this model conference through the various activities that have been planned for them. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Secretary General Kim Ji-hoon, for addressing those agenda. We have 4 agendas as she had just mentioned: experiences significant change, emission increase, technology, and role of GCF for developing countries. There seems to be a lot to discuss altogether. Then it is now time to invite our students from 10 countries to the stage, but for the smooth operation, we have divided these 10 students into 2 groups. The first group is the USA, Australia, China, Singapore, and Indonesia. And the first discussion session will be moderated by Professor Lee Se-yeon of Jeonbuk National University and Professor Lee Hee-an of Handong International Law School. Now, let's bring 2 professors and 5 students to the stage with a big round of applause. Are we all ready? Yes, now the floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hyun Lee. I'm professor of Handong International Law School, and my colleague here, Lee Se-yeon 교수님, from Jeonbuk National University. We are pleased to be with you this afternoon to moderate this afternoon session, where we'll be hearing from students from different countries who will share their experiences of what climate change has done to their countries. So as was announced by our MC, the first 5 will be representatives from Australia, China, the United States, Indonesia, and Singapore. So at this time, I'd like to invite Talia Rodriguez to speak about climate change in Australia. Please give her a round of applause.
Good afternoon. My name is Talia Rodriguez, and I live in one of the luckiest countries in the world, Australia. Despite being a highly developed and modern nation, Australia is still remarkably vulnerable to climate change due to its size and diverse range of climatic zones. From deserts to snowy mountains to tropical rainforests, Australia is vast, unique, and unparalleled in natural beauty. There are over 25 million Australians, but none of us can stop climate change alone. This is a feat we can only achieve together. We must now realise that execution is everything, because we are both the cause and the solution to this global issue. Climate change does not discriminate, and the decisions we make today will have lasting consequences for future generations. As we continue to contribute to the level of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, our temperatures continue to rise. Australia's temperatures have risen by over 1 degree Celsius since 1910, with 8 of Australia's top 10 warmest years ever recorded occurring since 2005. Although the statistics may seem insignificant and isolated to some, the consequences everywhere are devastating. Ice sheets are melting, sea levels are rising, flooding and coastal erosion is occurring. Fresh water is becoming scarce, human health is at risk. Bushfires are ravaging our forests, animals are losing their habitats. Growing food is becoming more difficult, and extreme weather events are now the norm. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has made it unmistakably clear that these consequences are happening now, and we are destroying our only home. The damage resulting from climate change is real and needs our urgent attention. As Australia is home to the Great Barrier Reef, the effects of rising temperatures have been felt significantly in my home country. The reef is the world's largest coral reef system, stretching over 2,300 kilometres, and currently, climate change is its primary threat. To date, there has been a loss of 50% of the reef's initial coral cover, and recent mass bleaching events are turning our oceans into graveyards. The long-term health and resilience of the reef is at risk due to the toxic combination of increased sea levels, rising sea temperatures, coral bleaching, pollution, and ocean acidification. Further, Australia is the most isolated and the driest country in the world. Hotter and drier conditions have recently caused catastrophic bushfires in Australia, especially in Queensland and my own state, New South Wales. As of the 19th of November this year, 4 people have died and over 300 homes have been destroyed from these bushfires. They are still blazing today and are causing irreversible harm to native wildlife and serious damage to ecosystems. We are no longer the sunburnt country, but the country on fire. Australia is home to approximately 5% of the world's biodiversity, and this figure alone stresses the importance of the role my country plays in this global issue. We are tipping the dynamic and precarious balance of our ecosystem, and our environment is running out of time to adapt as climate change continues at an exponential rate. We are past the point of these catastrophic events being a reality check or a wake-up call. Execution really is now everything, as our actions today will define our future now more than ever. Australia is a prosperous, healthy and educated society, well placed to adapt to climate change. However, our greenhouse gas emissions are approximately 1.5% of total global emissions, and we thus recognise we have a responsibility to contribute to a greater solution. In Australia, our primary response has been the establishment of the Direct Action Plan, with an emissions reduction fund the central feature of this scheme. To date, the fund has been allocated over $4.5 billion and provides incentives to reduce emissions based on a voluntary approach. In addition, Australia established a renewable energy target that aims at increasing the use of hydro, wave, wind and solar energy, as my country is heavily reliant on fossil fuels, and this needs to change. Australia has had difficulty developing and implementing an effective concerted response to climate change at a federal level due to numerous changes in government leadership and the lack of political willpower. Despite this, we're on track to meet our 2020 target under the Kyoto Protocol, though we need more ambitious targets moving forward in light of current scientific evidence. I strongly believe my country needs to take a more prominent role in solving this global issue and devote more resources to developing countries and our Pacific Island neighbours. We must understand and emphasise we can only overcome this challenge by working together, and today we've been given the opportunity to do just this. I truly hope this is the start of a cleaner and brighter future for all, and that during our time here we inspire great change. Thank you.
Thank you, Talia. We will now hear from Yulin from China, who will discuss the situation in her country. So please welcome Yulin to the stage, to the podium.
Good afternoon, elders, lecturers, and fellow students. It's a great honor to be here to deliver my presentation today. My name is Yulin Zheng, representative from China. I'm come from Department of Maritime Law, Dalian Maritime University. Today, my topic is mainly on seriousness of rising sea levels and its impact on the oceans. If the global temperatures rise by 4 Celsius, China will be the most threatened by rising sea levels. According to a new report by U.S. Research Institute, the major cities affected in China are Shanghai, Tianjin, Shenzhen, and Shantou. In the past 20 years, the sea level in China coastal areas has been rising significantly. From 2005 to 2015, the average sea level of China coastal areas was 3.3 centimeters higher than that of 1995 to 2015, and 8 centimeters higher than that of 1986 to 1995, the highest in the past 20 years. It results from the additional natural sun energy that arises from the increased heat in the oceans, which causes rising sea levels and intensifying sea surface temperatures. The diversified ocean currents and temperatures due to global climate change influence climate patterns worldwide. The aforementioned situation is resulting in the shrinkage of glaciers, early melting of ice on lakes and rivers. Animal species are moving, and tree and plant species have also been affected. The scientific predictions regarding the effects of global climate change over the oceans are now frequently in evidence. The issue of universal climate change and its impact on the oceans is a collective legal obligation to the oceanic states that demands international legal cooperation to cope with the worsening effects. China demonstrates to continue with an aim of being fully responsible for the negotiating conventions on climate governance, as well as prevention and the control of marine pollution. In addition, China has also enacted a series of relevant laws at domestic level in performance of its obligation and established by international treaties in addressing the climate change and its impact on the oceans. In 2012, the State Council approved the National Plan for Marine Functional Zones and the Coastal Provinces plans. In this regard, making comprehensive arrangement for the development and environmental protection of maritime areas under China's jurisdiction. In October 2016, the State Council issued a work plan for controlling greenhouse gas emission during the 13th five-year plan period in order to boost green low-carbon development. The current task is neither to create new rules or new institutions to solve new problems, but to allow the existing legal and policy instruments to be effectively implemented. We consider initiating international litigation against the carbon dioxide emitter in an effort to reduce the tendency towards rising sea levels. The ultimate solution to avoid the worsening situation of climate change over the oceans is to reduce the emission of GHG worldwide. It is also vital to safeguard the health of marine resources and the ecosystems. In the face of climate change, all countries will form a community of shared future for mankind, which requires all of us to work together to address climate change. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Yulin. Now we'll invite Landon from the United States to give his presentation. Please welcome him to the podium.
Hello, I'm here to talk about climate change and the US. But first, I have some little statistics and data about the US. The US is a population of about 327 million people, with an area of about 10 million square kilometers, and varying geographies and climates. The US is a massive country. So, aloha, my name is Landon Lee. I'm from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and I'm here to talk about the effects of climate change in the US. I want to thank the Yonsugu leaders and researchers for inviting me here, as well as Inha University. Hawaii has a very deep connection with Inha University, and I want to thank them for giving this opportunity. So the impact. What has and will climate change do to the US? So note I put has and will, because climate change is not a threat of the future. As we all know, it's happening now. Climate change is not waiting to change, it's going on right now. And climate change has impacted the US very negatively, as we saw in 2017 with Hurricane Harvey smashing into Texas, Hurricane Irma hitting Florida, and Hurricane Maria wreaking havoc on Puerto Rico. These three hurricanes made up about $250 billion worth of US damage and are known as the costliest US disasters in hurricane history in the US. In 2018, the California wildfire season was the deadliest and most destructive in history. It's still going on to this day. If you turn on the news in California, you will see that it is on fire currently. And just in January 2019, we have had a severe cold wave setting record low temperatures in the Midwest. This is a picture of a toilet bowl that exploded and it's frozen. And this was in the Midwest in January and February of this year. It's clear that the effects of climate change are very real and powerful, and they're going on and affecting the US right now. So I based this presentation on the 4th National Climate Assessment, which is kind of like the IPCC report, but this focuses mainly on the US and 8 varying regions throughout the US. It comes to the same conclusions, but provides guidance and principles for legislators in the US on what they should do to mitigate climate change. A note about this, this report was released last year, the most recent one of 2018 in November 24th, almost a year ago, which was on Thanksgiving weekend. The Trump administration purposely did this to kind of hide attention from this report. Okay. So this report finds that the temperature change by the end of the century on the low end will range from either 2.3 degrees to 6.7 degrees Fahrenheit, or on the higher end, 5.4 degrees to 11 degrees Fahrenheit. And sea level rise is expected to be either 1 to 2 feet or 2 to 6 feet. So climate change poses threats to safe and reliable supplies such as water, clean air, and protection from flood, erosion, and natural resources. So as we can see, with these increased temperatures and sea level rise, droughts are more likely to increase, as we see in California. Droughts have been ravaging here, causing people to ration more water. Heavy rainfall in the Louisiana area and the Midwest has depleted soil nutrition, impacting our agriculture sector. Increasing wildfires throughout the West has started encroaching on urban development, destroying homes and displacing communities, and higher sea levels, such as areas where I live in Hawaii, has resulted in massive coastal erosion, destroying infrastructure. So to the economy, climate change is expected to cause substantial losses to infrastructure and will impede by 2090, the economic damage will range between $80 billion to $155 billion on the high end. Extreme weather events can wreak havoc on communities, as we saw with Hurricane Harvey, Irma, and Maria. Hurricane Maria left Puerto Rico without full electricity for about 11 months, almost a year without electricity just from one single hurricane. Drier conditions have allowed wildfires to really prosper in the areas of California, and agriculture is greatly impacted by this change in temperature. And the cost to repair these things will be astronomical. To people and communities, higher temperatures, increasing air quality risks, increasing weather events, flooding, and other changes threaten the well-being of the American people, and particularly vulnerable populations who do not have the economic means to move away or adjust their living standards. For example, extreme temperatures affect people living in homes without adequate insulated homes. Warmer climate means geographic area and spawning time for disease-carrying mosquitoes are expanded, such as in Florida and Louisiana. Indigenous peoples' cultural relationship with the land and species are further disturbed, and natural disasters are a heavy cost emotionally and economically, as we saw with the various hurricanes and other natural disasters. So solutions. What is the US going to do in response to all of these issues that will be coming up by the turn of the century? So the solutions are broken down into two steps: mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation is mitigating the effects of climate change and greenhouse gases, and adaptation is to build more resilient infrastructure to reduce the damage of the increased temperatures. So far there has been not much federal leadership on this, and it's largely been done on the state level and local municipalities. So mitigation, this would mean switching our fossil fuel consumption to more renewable energy resources, such as solar, wind, geothermal, and etc. For adaptation, this would mean hardening our shorelines or building more resilient infrastructures, mandating that buildings be built with sustainability standards, such as having a building be LEED certified, have rain catchment systems, or have a percentage of it come from renewable energy resources. And these are the various areas that will be affected as outlined in the different communities. Oh, let me get that right here, yeah. So, and each of them have very different solutions for what impacts they have. I'm just gonna, for the sake of time, I'm not gonna go through this.
So maybe you can wrap it up very soon.
Yeah. Okay. And so my final words are that we can and need to do better. The US is the world's wealthiest nation. Our interests are clearly at risk, and we need to lead in sustainability. If not, it only gets worse. States do a lot on their own, but there needs to be federal leadership. And currently we have an administration who has been hostile towards talks about climate change. And we need to have our federal government fund innovation and states to implement their proper mitigation and adaptation procedures. The US can and needs to do better, because right now we're suffering. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Landon. We will now hear a report from Amira from Indonesia. So we now invite you to the podium. Please welcome her to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amira Bilkis, and I'm the representative of Indonesia. This is the questions that we always ask ourselves. Are we gonna win? Climate change is a race against time. Imagine your house is on fire. You don't put fuel in it. You look for extinguisher, try to put off the fire. Same goes to the climate change that happens in our home. The progress we've made from making the IPCC, and then Climate Change Summit, Paris Agreement, Kyoto Protocol, and everything, it's actually aligned with the scientific evidence that provided by the IPCC assessment reports, that it needed to be translated into political commitment as well as the legal instrument. However, it has been too long since the actual act itself taken place. This is mentioned in the UN Climate Action Summit in 2019. Global emissions are reaching record levels and show no sign of peaking. And it's actually infatuated our life here, the welfare of the people. The need to act now and effectively are far more crucial than ever. It will decide whether we will enter the second 2 degrees and its risk, which we might enter unreversed condition. I live in Jakarta, the capital city of Indonesia. As mentioned by the MC this morning, Indonesia will move its capital city to Borneo or another island that we have, because there are droughts everywhere, and then the rising sea levels that happening in Indonesia. And because I live in Jakarta, the drought that happened the extent of the drought that happened in my country is actually triggered uncontrollable haze as well. The red spots is a hotspot that we have in our countries, and it's actually bringing uncontrollable haze from forest fire to its neighbor countries. It is also affecting our diplomatic relationship with them. Greenpeace actually reported that throughout 2019, Indonesia has 19,000 hotspots, which is emit the same amount of emissions only from wildfires compared to the total emission of UK in a year. Do you see this red? This is not a filter.
Air quality index even reached 2,000, resulting fire cloud phenomenon this year in 15 September 2019, responsible for the death of the newly born babies, interrupting health, education, and economy of Indonesia. Jakarta is also one of the fastest sinking cities, and one of the reasons due to the rising sea levels. And in mid-August, Indonesia's president announced its plan to move the capital as its actually consequences with the economy, social, and also environment. This is Jakarta in 1977, and this is what we are now. We are sinking rapidly. Indonesia recognized the energy sector as at the front line about the issues, and as it is by far the largest source of emission that cause global warming. Energy dual role in modern civilizations is essential to all comforts of the modern life that we are having now. By the way, it's largely produced and consumed damages the environment which we all depend and share. Therefore, rapid energy transition would require it across all action and all sectors. Indonesia committed to support low carbon development and green economy through establishing LDC plan, and it is expected to be the key to further accelerate economic growth without sacrificing environmental sustainability and social inclusivity. Other efforts shows in this one. Actually, despite planning and great potential that we have, Indonesia has its own challenges, such as limited technology and lacks of supportive policy framework for investment in innovative green projects and LDC. And all of this might undermine the government's NDCs and its energy ambitions for 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Amira, for your presentation. And now, to end this first session of our presentations, we will now invite Wen Ting from Singapore. So please welcome her.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Distinguished guests, professors, students from all over the world. I'm Wen Ting from the National University of Singapore, and I'll be speaking about climate change and its impacts on Singapore. So I'll start off with a video. Oh, okay, all right. It's okay. So this video is basically depicting what Singapore looked like when we had our annual floods. So what I mean by annual floods is not that we flood every year, but we have very, very heavy rainfalls each year. And our drainage systems cannot handle the high amount of rainfall. So as you can see here in this graph, you see the rainfall intensity increasing each year. And because climate change is a problem where increased weather extremes happen, we know that this will only happen more and more often. Next, many of you would know that Singapore is an island state. So as a low-lying island, it is also at threat from coastal inundation. So as you can see from these images, the 2 degrees Celsius warming will see that a lot of parts of Singapore, such as those in the south and the industrial areas, will be inundated. And this will impact our economic and livelihoods as well. Next, we also have the urban heat island profile. So if you don't know what this is actually an effect where urban areas retain heat and increasingly become more heated up. So Singapore is very highly urbanized, and because of that, the city traps a lot of heat and produces a lot of heat. So people think it's very hot, they increase energy consumption to cool their buildings, and this only exacerbates the climate change impacts. So as you can see, this is Singapore, how Singapore looks like. It's highly urbanized, and the impacts of climate change will not just impact the way we live, but also work and play. So what are some measures that Singapore have taken to mitigate or adapt to these changes? So Singapore, we have very little natural resources, so these are some adaptation measures that Singapore has taken. The first one, as you can see on your left, will be the drainage and flood prevention strategies. So these include measures to improve the drainage system such that our rainfall intensity will not result in so much flooding and impact our economic livelihoods. The next will be coastal prevention and protection strategies, as seen in the middle. So this increases the minimum land reclamation levels. And we also have commissioned a coastal adaptation study to assess long-term adaptation measures. Lastly, we also increase our water security because we know that extreme weather patterns will really impact the security and risk of our water sources. And this is done through a lot of technological innovations such as new water and desalination plants. So Singapore has plans to meet 70% of Singapore's water demand by 2030 with these technologies shown here. Next, we also have energy efficiency measures as well as research. So these energy efficiency measures span a number of industries and sectors of the economy. So you can see here industry, buildings, transport, household, and water and waste areas are having technologies to improve their energy and carbon efficiency so that they are better able to equip themselves with the challenges that climate change will bring. So some of the more notable examples is solar power. Singapore is land scarce, so we can't really tap on wind or hydropower to power our electricity. So this is one of our solar power panels on the housing development buildings. And we also have the largest floating water solar panel farms in the world. Next, we also tap into technologies such as the Marina Bay Underground District Cooling Network. So this network actually helps to increase energy efficiency and reduce the energy needed to power the air condition needs of the downtown area. So you can see that there is quite a lot done, but in my opinion, more can be done. Because we have to recognize that different sectors of the economy come together, and there are also legal and infrastructural constraints, such as the transport system that is still highly reliant on fossil fuels, and the fact that solar power cannot help us in the intermittency problem that a service economy needs to address. Next, we also have companies and consumers that need to change their mindsets so as to be better able to equip themselves with the climate change challenges and change their way of living such that they are more able to adopt green technologies. Lastly, the government also comes into play in supporting with legal infrastructure. So with that, I think that more can be done and we can do it now. Thank you.
Thank you.